So let's start that 2.4 and talk about how to multiply and divide integers. Now we've already talked about how to multiply and divide whole numbers. That was not a problem. What you need to know is that all the multiplication and division principles we learn, they're going to apply. We just have the multiplication rule to learn for our signs, and that's pretty much it for today. We'll talk about a couple special cases, and that'll wrap it up. So 2.4, and we're talking about multiplying and dividing some integers. Again, integers are just those numbers with positives and negatives. That's all we mean. Well, we know how to do something like this. How much is that?
15.
Good. It means 3 times 5. Fantastic. And we know how to do stuff like this. How much is that?
28.
Because what we have is essentially 5 plus 5 plus 5 3 times, or 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 7 times. And we have repeated addition on that. Well, what that begs the question is, what does it mean when I do something like this? Well, how are we supposed to remember, how are we supposed to understand why this is going to be negative 15? Because you've probably been taught the rule before, most of you have at least, that, because you all said to me before anyway, you said a positive times a negative is a,
Negative.
most of you know that already. Why? I don't know, because my teacher told me to. That's how we do it. Do you really know why? If you think of it in the same terms as you thought of 3 times 5, 3 times 5 you can understand that because you have 5 plus 5 plus 5, that makes 15. That's clear, right? You do the same principle for multiplication of integers. It's still the same thing. You still have repeated addition. However, we had to cover addition rules first to do multiplication because what you have here is repeated addition of a negative number. So negative 5 times 3 really does mean negative 5 plus negative 5 plus negative 5 3 times. Use the addition rule on that. That's the same number 3 times, but what's negative 5 plus negative 5?
Negative 10.
Good. Same sign, add them together, keep the common sign. Haven't we done that before in here? We get negative 10, and then you add on another negative 5. Negative 10 plus negative 5, that's negative 15. Same sign, add them together, keep the common sign. That's why a negative times a positive equals a negative. That's why. Because you're repeatedly adding the same negative number over and over and over again. And so we're going to get negative times a positive is negative 15. And what this leads to is our 2 rules for multiplication. First one, if we're multiplying numbers, if we have the same signs, like positive times a positive, well, we know it's a positive, or a negative times a negative, we're going to get a positive out of that. So for multiplication, a negative times a negative equals a... Let's try that again. A negative times a negative equals a...
Positive.
Very good. Positive. Negative times a negative equals a what?
Positive.
Very good. So if we're multiplying 2 numbers with the same sign, that means either both positive or both negative, our answer will be positive. If we multiply 2 numbers with the same sign, the product, that's what we get when we multiply the product will be positive. Well, that's kind of nice. That's the rule y'all remember. Y'all knew that negative times a negative equals a positive. You said that to me one of the first days of class when we didn't even cover multiplication yet. That sticks with it. That we have that idea down. Now, the question that I have for you is this rule the same as our addition rule?
No.
So we need to use two different rules, whether we're talking about multiplication division or addition subtraction. You have to know what we're doing when we're doing it. Are you sticking with me here? You with me? So it depends on what you're doing. Addition rules work differently than the multiplication rules, which case we go, oh, negative times a negative is a positive. That's great. We love that. So here we have a couple cases. We can do a positive times a positive. Ladies and gentlemen, what is a positive times a positive? Positive times a positive gave us a
Positive.
definitely positive. We also have another case where our signs could be the same. We could have a negative and a negative. What's a negative times a negative?
Positive.
That's right. For our other case, we just talked about that. We talked about the reason why a negative times a positive or a positive times a negative gives us a negative. So our other case is, if we multiply two numbers with different signs, the product will be negative. We have two cases here as well. We could have a positive number first and a negative number second, or we could have a negative number first and a positive number second. In either case, our result, our product will be negative. That's it. That's two rules. You get those rules, you get the addition rules, you've pretty much mastered integers. The only other thing we're going to do is talk about order of operations.
Are we going to be able to use our note on the test?
No. Okay, let's practice some things here. Keep going. Good deal. As opposed to the addition rule. The addition rule, it mattered on the size of the number, which it was going to be positive or negative. It mattered, or whether you had the same sign or different signs. Here, what we're doing is we are just following these two multiplication rules. The size of the numbers don't really matter. It just matters what the signs are. So we're going to look at the very first one. We have negative 8 times 4. Are we multiplying the same signs or different signs?
Same. Different.
So we're going to get a positive or negative.
Negative.
So immediately, without even looking at the numbers, you can tell whether this answer should be positive or negative. That's different than the addition rule. So we're going to go, okay, I know I'm going to get a negative. That's the first thing you do when you're multiplying numbers. Or even when you're dividing numbers, you find the sign out, and then you multiply the numbers regularly. Just go, oh, I already know it's negative. Now we just got to do 8 times 4. What's 8 times 4?
32.
It's just going to be negative 32. That's why people generally have an easier time with multiplication than they do with addition. Even though it seems like it should be the opposite, right? Because multiplication is usually taught after addition. Addition is generally a harder concept because there's caveats to that information. Next one, -4 times -3. Are we going to get a positive or negative, folks?
Positive.
Good. The negative times the negative, those are the same signs. That's going to give us a positive. We're going to get how much?
12.
Yep. We already know the sign is positive. We just have to multiply it. 0 times -5.
0.
What's anything times 0?
0.
Is 0 positive or negative?
0.
Negative.
Neither. Neither. It doesn't have a sign. It's right in the middle of our number line. Okay, 9 times -12, positive or negative?
Negative.
Notice how we're finding the sign out before we even multiply. So negative and negative, oh my gosh. How do we do that?
48.
Do it on the side,
No.
use your fingers,
Oh, that's
whatever.
nine.
Yeah, negative 108. Do the rest of them. Go ahead. What did you get for -10 times 7?
Negative 7.
Perfect. What did you get for -12 times 0? What did you get for 13 times -7?
Negative.
What did you get for -11 times -7?
77.
How many people feel okay with multiplication right now? Good. Good. We also need to cover when we can multiply more than 2 numbers at a time. So let's do that for a little while.
Isn't that one 91? 91.
What did I do? 90? Oh, I said 81.
Shouted out the wrong number.
Oh, it's okay. See how much I trust you guys? I trust you. Oh my God.
I've been looking at my numbers.
There we go. Okay, make that correction. I just write what you tell me, guys. That's it. Can we multiply more than 2 numbers at a time? Answer, yeah, of course we can. Here's the deal, though. Oftentimes, it's very much easier to figure out the sign of these numbers than do them 2 at a time. I know that kind of goes against what we've been talking about addition rule. However, when you think about multiplication, you can think of the sign of this product before you even start the problem. If you think about it this way, what's a positive times a negative?
Negative.
We're going to get a negative here, right?
Right.
But then we multiply by another negative, and we're going to get what?
Positive.
Could you just tell that all of a sudden from up here? One thing people do often is they count up how many negative numbers you have. Because if you can pair negatives together, what's a negative times a negative?
Positive.
If you can pair those up, positive, then you're going to get a positive result. If you can't pair them up, you go, okay, here's a pair, but I have this extra negative, your product's going to be a negative. Does that make sense? It matters whether you have an even number of negatives or an odd number of negatives. If you have an even number of negatives, they will pair up. That means like 0 negatives, or 2 negatives, or 4 negatives, or 6, or 8. You can pair all of them up and make all positives out of that. If you don't, if you have an odd number of negatives, you can pair up maybe a couple of them, but you'll have that one hanging out at the end. And that will be a negative product to that. We'll do a few examples and you'll see what I'm talking about. So on this, if you really wanted to work it out into like step by step, you can do that. It'll work out just fine. These two are going to give you -21. Then you're going to do it again, and you're going to get positive